Really, we're on a 13-week session right now looking at Proverbs 14:1, which says, "The wise woman builds her house, but with her own hands the foolish one tears hers down." And we don't want to be the foolish woman. We want to build a strong, healthy family, a strong, healthy marriage. And so God has given us little analogies to apply to the different parts of a home. And so today we're on to the bedroom. And of course, what came to mind was what happens in the bedroom between a husband and a wife. So this is even more applicable, isn't it, right now when we're at homes, we're with our spouses, much more than we normally might be because of the coronavirus pandemic. And so we're kind of inside our homes. Oh, this is so fun having the lawnmower guys right outside the door. Do you hear them? I hear them. I'm going to try to compete with them. I'm probably going to go hoarse by the time this is over. You just got to laugh about these things. I digress. Let's get right to the lesson, ladies. So I want to start out with this. I want to start with 4 essential truths about sex. Essential truth number 1. Most men have a very high sex drive, and if you shut your husband out sexually, if you kind of shut him down, let him know that you barely tolerate sex, you're basically setting him up to stray through looking at pornography, to stray through spending time inappropriately with other women, being attracted to other women. And I'm not saying you're the cause of a husband doing those things, but you're sort of teeing it up for him to be tempted if you're acting like you can barely stand sex. So that's essential truth number 1. Essential truth number 2. God intends sex to be confined to marriage. This is His way, and it is actually perfect for us. Hebrews 13:4, "Let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterous." A lot of us probably did have sex outside of marriage. I will just be honest and say I did when I was 16. Got the old pressure from the boyfriend, "If you love me," and I fell for that line. Maybe you even had an affair, within a marriage at some point or whatever. A lot of us have not led perfect lives in this regard, but here's what I want to say. Do any of us look back on those decisions and say, yeah, if I had to do it all over again, I would do that. That was really smart. Not so much. There are unintended pregnancies. There are sexually transmitted diseases. There's this bond that forms with you and maybe that boyfriend that's kind of hard to break, even though maybe he treats you terribly, but you feel bonded to him because you've had sex. All sorts of negative ramifications. And then a lot of boyfriends don't even want to make a commitment because why buy the milk if you can get the cow, or why buy the cow if you can get the milk for free? I think that's the old saying, right? So again, this is not about shame. It's just about saying God's way is perfect. He designed sex to be within marriage. Essential truth number 3. God intends husbands and wives to have a vibrant sex life that is bonding, erotic, and enjoyable. Yes, you heard me say the word erotic. God says we should not deprive our spouse of a vibrant sex life. Listen to what He says in 1 Corinthians 7, starting in verse 2. "But because of the temptation to sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife, and each woman her own husband. The husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, and likewise the wife to her husband. For the wife does not have authority over his body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer, but then come together again, so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control." The Lord intended for us to actually enjoy each other's bodies. Listen to what the Bible says. Yes, this is in the Bible. Proverbs 5, starting in verse 18. "Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice in the wife of your youth, a lovely deer, a graceful doe. Let her breasts fill you at all times with delight. Be intoxicated always in her love." Yeah, that's in the Bible. And the Bible makes it clear that God is on board with a husband and wife being sexually playful and erotic with each other. Here's just one little sentence out of Song of Songs, chapter 4. The bride says to her groom, "Let my lover come into his garden and taste its delicious fruits." That sounds kind of erotic to me, and I'll let you just kind of let your imagination go wild there with what that verse is about. But clearly, God intended for a husband and wife to delight in each other's bodies, to be erotic and playful and flirtatious. Clearly, that is His plan. So, with that being said, I want to talk about 8 reasons why sex is so vital to your husband. It's vital to you too, but specifically why sex is so vital to your husband and why you should build an active sex life with him. First of all, God commanded men to be fruitful and increase in number in Genesis chapter 1. And in order to accomplish that command to be fruitful and to multiply, God appears to have wired men with this incredibly strong desire to join sexually with a woman. According to my husband, most men have thoughts of sex pop into their minds almost constantly. It's a very strong, instinctive drive that God has placed in all men. And God actually instructs men to get married if they can't control this desire. 1 Corinthians 7 verse 9. If they cannot control themselves, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. So keep in mind, that's a huge part of the reason that your husband married you, is to have sex with you. Number 2. When you have sexual intercourse with your husband, the hormone oxytocin is released, and it's actually a bonding hormone, which can be an amazing thing in marriage. It's truly a great sense of intimacy that is created when you come together, when you make love with your husband. He'll be more strongly bonded to you, and you'll be more strongly bonded to him. And this is super helpful when you're not having a great day with your husband, because that oxytocin keeps you bonded together. Number 3, God designed us to enjoy intimate fellowship through sexual union. When you're naked, you're the most vulnerable and open. And so when you invite your husband to join you in this vulnerable time, you're establishing the most intimate, close connection possible. Mark 10, starting at verse 7. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Talk about bonding, right? Number 4, men seem to have this instinctive desire to bring sexual pleasure to their wives. Now, this might seem kind of confusing to women, but almost more important than him reaching an orgasm is for you to do that he would be able to bring you sexual fulfillment. That makes him feel kind of like a stud, like your sexual hero. And if you don't allow him the opportunity to, complete that mission, he's going to feel like an inadequate man, like a failure. So let him be your sexual hero, as strange as that might sound. Number 5, when your husband indicates he wants to make love to you, he's actually taking a huge risk. He's risking your rejection, and that crushes a man's tender ego. He's basically saying, do you want me? Am I a good enough lover for you? Remember, God instructs wives to respect their husbands in Ephesians 5:33, and there's a reason for this command. God knows that most men struggle with insecurity, and he needs to know that you esteem him, that you want him, that you desire him sexually. Number 6, making love to you greatly reduces his stress level. Most men carry a tremendous amount of stress, women do too, but a lot of men feel that real burden of providing for their family. For most men, sex not only allows them a physical release, but it also can make them feel successful at something. Again, allow him to be your hero in bed. Let him know what pleases you. And when he does that, let him know that he is the man, right? Number 7, making love to you frequently is important to his physical well-being and health. Yes. A WebMD writer, Kathleen Doheny, gives extensive evidence about this in an article called 10 Surprising Health Benefits of Sex. I won't go through all 10 benefits, but here's one important health perk from sex. She cites research finding that having sex twice or more a week reduced the risk of fatal heart attack by half for men, compared with those who had sex less than once a month. Wow, that's kind of a huge health benefit. And number 8, making love to you provides a healthy source of comfort for your husband. I've often been confused about why men seem to want to make love at the oddest times, like they could be sick to their stomach or something and they still want to have sex. This is confusing. This is not how women think, right? But my husband told me it's because making love is very comforting to a man. And the Bible even indicates this. In Genesis 24, verse 67, the Bible says, Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he married Rebekah. So she became his wife, and he loved her, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. For some reason, this is very comforting to your husband. So those are things we should know about why this vibrant sex life with your husband is so important. But here's where I know what most of you are landing right now. You're thinking, okay, that's cool. I understand that, but I have these issues. And we often have multiple issues, so it's kind of a complex problem. So I wanted to talk with you about overcoming some of those common barriers to really a healthy, robust, vibrant sex life with your husband. And just maybe jot down some notes, because I'm going to go through a whole bunch of common challenges and then give you some thoughts about how you might overcome some of those challenges. So take your own notes on this, because not everything is going to apply to you, but something probably will. For many of you, and this is my story, you were sexually abused or even raped as a child or as an adult, and so you have a lot of trauma associated with this, maybe even flat out PTSD, and it's like, you cringe at the thought, and it's hard to relax. So, some thoughts if this is your story. See a counselor. And then ask if you can be the initiator. That is super helpful, because remember, when you were assaulted, you didn't have any control over the situation. And so if your husband's coming at you, you're like, ugh, your immediate response is to like push back. But if you can be the initiator, that's a whole different thing. So ask your husband, would he be willing to let you be the initiator? Go slow and ask him if he'd be willing to stop if you need to just pause for a moment. And tell your husband about certain triggers that he might need to temporarily avoid or maybe even permanently avoid, but things that are especially triggering for you. And then coach your soul. Remind yourself, this is my husband. You don't need to be saying this out loud. That might kill the mood, but remind yourself, this is my husband. I'm going to enjoy this. He loves me. Number 2, common barrier to a healthy physical intimacy with your husband is that you're physically exhausted or stressed. This is the case for so many moms, right? That you're just running around all day, the kids are hanging on you, and then he wants something from you, and you're like, ugh, right? I know some of you feel that way. So what are some thoughts here on how to address that one? Ask your husband to help with the evening responsibilities. If you tell him why you're asking him to help, I bet you he'd be Johnny on the spot. Yes, I can take care of the dishes, I can get the kids in bed, right? So ask him to help with some of those things. Maybe go to bed earlier so you are more rested, or make love in the morning when you are rested. And maybe just cut some things out of your schedule, because we're all running at a frantic pace, aren't we? So maybe just cutting some things out of your schedule. I know right now with COVID-19, we're not having so many outside activities, but in normal American life, we are overly busy. So maybe it's time to cut back some things out of your schedule and make your marriage and intimacy in your marriage a top priority. A third common barrier is being emotionally drained. Boy, on this one, ask your husband again to help with the children if that's why you're so emotionally drained, and then take time to spend with the Lord a couple of times a day where you just give yourself permission for a time out to just maybe sip a cup of tea and sit in the sun or listen to some worship music or get into your Bible, and you just allow yourself a moment of solitude. We all need that emotionally, so give yourself that permission. And again, ask God to reveal if you're carrying too many burdens. Maybe there's something that He does not intend for you to carry right now, and He's saying you can put that aside, at least for this season. You're carrying too much. Another common barrier to that healthy physical intimacy is resentment in your relationship. It could be your husband resenting you. It could be you resenting your husband. And who wants to be making love to the person that you resent? So you're going to have to deal with this. Even my fellow conflict avoiders, you need to deal with this. Find the time and ask the Holy Spirit to give you the words to bring this up with your husband and say, this has been really bothering me and I want to talk about it because I think it's getting in the way of our marriage, and I want us to have a healthy marriage. So can we talk about this thing? And then not just bring it up, but work all the way through it. I've learned that that's super important, especially for conflict avoiders. We finally work up the courage to just say this is bothering us, but we don't bother to work all the way through it. And you need to do that. Talk about your different perspectives and come up with a compromise or a solution that will resolve this issue. A fifth common barrier is shame. Shame about sex, your past experiences, what you were told about sex. This is a common one, especially if you were brought up in like a real legalistic church. You might feel like sex is dirty even in marriage. Well, that's not true. And so ask God to reveal to you the truth about sex. And the truth is that God designed sex. He designed men and women to come together sexually. Look at the Song of Songs, maybe chapter 4, where it's very erotic. Read it for yourself. I think he's talking about oral sex there. And Proverbs 5, starting at verse 18, where he's telling husbands to delight in their wives and let their breasts fill you with delight. And God is pretty erotic. So God is not, all, fuddy-duddy about this. He actually designed us to enjoy sex. And if you have shame about your past sexual history, ask God to forgive you. When you ask God to forgive you, and now how long it takes for Him to forgive you? a microsecond. It's done. So if he's forgiven you completely in a nanosecond, why do you keep on beating yourself up about it? You are forgiven. Number 6 reason that we sometimes have obstacles to a healthy sex life is not giving yourself permission to enjoy sex. Sometimes we engage in negative self-talk in our heads about sex. Oh, that's, oh, I don't have time for this. Oh, but stop talking like that. Coach your soul. Say, I am sexy. This is going to be great. I'm going to love this. Allow yourself to enjoy it. That leads me to common challenge number 7, body insecurity, which is huge for most women, right? Body insecurity. Here's what I want to say about that. Do what you can with what you've got, first of all. If you do need to exercise or lose a little weight, of course, work on those things, but then do what you can with what you've got. And realize this, that most husbands want to see their wife's naked body, even if it is not perfect, even if you have stretch marks or whatever. They still want to see that. So carry yourself with confidence and spunk, be playful and flirty, and you will come across as sexy, even if you don't have a supermodel body, because who does? Number 8, common obstacle, your husband doesn't seem very interested in sex. And more I'm hearing this from young wives that their husbands don't seem interested in sex. So what's going on there? Could be a multitude of reasons. So first, pray that the Lord would give you discernment on this, and then gently bring up this conversation. Ask God for the right timing, but bring it up with your husband and say, I've noticed that you don't seem to be very interested. What do you think the reason could be? And there are many reasons that could, medication. We have a lot of guys on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications and all sorts of medications that can interfere with their libido. It could be that they are fatigued, that they're exhausted from work. It could be that they have resentment. It could be that they're looking at pornography. Unfortunately, that is also a common reason that they're satisfying themselves with pornography. It could be their age. Things change when you age. So bring up that very gently and discuss that with your husband. And once you figure out what it could be, address those issues with compassion. The 9th common obstacle to building a healthy sex life with your husband is that your sex drive is low. So go to the doctor if that's the case. Get some blood work done. Find out if there's something that could be, physically addressed within you. And then if it's not that your actual hormones are out of balance, could it be one of the other challenges we've just talked about? Probably it is. So review some of what we've already shared. A 10th common obstacle, your husband doesn't know how to warm you up sexually. Well, guess what? He's not a mind reader. So this is where you'll have to be bold enough to actually tell him, do you need music? Do you need candles? Do you need him to just hold you and love on you and just be affectionate ahead of time? Tell him. Number 11, maybe your husband says things or does things that really turn you off. Again, he's not a mind reader. You're going to have to tell him about these things. Number 12, maybe you don't know how to get yourself interested in sex. Women often get in the mood by thinking about sex. I mean, it starts up here for most women, so you might have to train your mind to do that. I know some women who actually write in their calendars like twice a week, TAS, think about sex. And they start doing that in the morning because that gets them in the mood. Another thing that I found is really helpful is there's a book by Dr. Kevin Lehman called Sheet Music. It's like a little pun, sheet music, making music between your sheets. Get it? It's a Christian author, but it's really, and it kind of breaks down how our bodies are formed. And anyway, but it's tastefully done. But you read that out loud with your husband, you're both going to be in the mood. I'm just saying. And then put on something that makes you feel sexy. Number 13, common obstacle, that maybe sex is painful or uncomfortable. Well, again, share this with your husband. Ask him to do something different. Maybe you do need to see a doctor. And definitely relaxing is helpful because some of you are really uptight and you might need to give yourself time to just decompress from the day, take a bubble bath, just relax ahead of time. Number 14, common obstacle. Your husband pressures you to engage in perverse sex acts and you're just not comfortable doing that. Well, again, tell him that you want to have a fantastic sex life, but you won't do that particular thing. And tell him, he doesn't want you to feel uncomfortable, but this particular thing is making you feel that way. Just 2 more common challenges to address. Number 15, you might have difficulty reaching an orgasm. And I just want to let you know that is actually very, very common. You are not, a really different person if that's your case. You're actually falling into a very common situation. It's kind of normal, especially having a problem reaching orgasm strictly through just intercourse. So experiment with some different things. I'm not going to get all graphic here, but you can experiment with some different things other than just intercourse so that you can actually find pleasure too. And then number 16, the last common obstacle, maybe you're just too stressed to relax and enjoy sex. So sit down with your husband and brainstorm together ideas on how to reduce your stress level. So with all that being said, I did think it was important to talk about some boundaries in the bedroom to keep God's design for sex inside a healthy framework. So here's what I want to say. It's okay to be playful and erotic with your husband, but be careful that you don't travel outside the boundaries of what God intends for sex. Ephesians 5:3 says, "But among you there must not even be a hint of sexual immorality." Not even a hint of sexual immorality. So some things that would appear to be outside the boundaries would be watching pornography, because that's lusting after someone else's body. Involving someone else, anyone else, in the sex life between you and your husband, that would be out of bounds. And then doing anything where you or your spouse feels degraded or uncomfortable, because that is not loving. If one of the spouses feels really uncomfortable or humiliated or like this is degrading, that is not loving.